What do all of these global organizations, whether it's global education, of which Common Core is a part, or the Global United Nations, or the World Health Organization, or the International Labor Organization, what is the one thing they have all in common? I'm Dr. Duke, and this is Constitution Corner. Well, what better place than the Constitution Corner to talk about the all-encompassing nature of globalist organizations like the United Nations? Let's ask ourselves one really honest question here. To what degree can we blame globalism for the problem we're in now? How much better off would we be right now if we didn't have all of our major medical supplies, all of our most important drugs made in China? How much better off would we be right now if we didn't have Congress funding laboratories like the one in Wuhan that perhaps allowed this mutation, this virus, to escape? How much better off would we be in terms of our own American economy, our own American welfare, if we had greater control who's crossing our borders? If we had more control over who enters our country when, if we didn't have a Democrat Party that was all about throwing the doors open, letting people walk, crawl, swim, fly in without any documentation, and to allow them to stay. What if we were less globalist? And ask yourself this question too. The word pandemic means an epidemic that encompasses all the world, a globalist virus, so to speak. So let me ask you, what good have globalist organizations been during this crisis? Can you think of one meaningful thing the United Nations has said or done in the entire going on almost 5.5 month series, the 5.5 month period in which this virus has become known and understood? Can you name one meaningful thing that the United Nations has done? Can you name one meaningful thing that the United Nations has said? What response is there from the so-called United Nations? There's none, other than to support the World Health Organization, which, like the UN, is a globalist organization that is much more political than it actually is medical, right? As we know, the United Nations isn't about uniting nations. And wasn't it just during the Wuhan virus? Wasn't it just during the virus that came from China that the United Nations is appointing China to a number of positions, number of committees in the UN that deal with human rights, that deal with transparency? That's what you get from globalist organizations. Do we not know that the World Health Organization has done nothing but propagandize for the Chinese? Now you got American people, so-called American billionaires like Bill Gates, who's defending China, talking about how China did everything right. China was on top of this, even as they're lying to us about our numbers. We now know without a single shred of a doubt that the number dead from this virus in China is 3 or 4 times what the Chinese government are telling us, and that despite the fact that China keeps arguing that they have all but conquered the disease of the virus, other cities in China have been shut down. This isn't debatable. This isn't arguable. And yet you have American plutocrats, right? Think about a guy like Bill Gates, whose loyalty is to a global understanding, not to an American understanding. It was the American system that gave Bill Gates his freedom. It was the American system of entrepreneurship that allowed a guy who dropped out of college to create a company in his garage that went global. And no sooner did it go global than Gates went global with it. This is the same Bill Gates who has spent about 10 years engaging in eugenics in Africa, the sterilization, the murder of unborn babies, of brown and black-skinned people in Africa in the name of climate control. This is the same Bill Gates who paid billions of dollars to put Common Core into your public schools and to try to export that to other nations around the globe. Common Core, which is a collectivist form of global education. If the educrats like Bill Gates get their way, kids all across the world are going to be learning the exact same thing in the exact same classrooms at the exact same hour. Common Core was a huge step in America towards this, and it's also been a gigantic failure. What do all of these global organizations, whether it's global education, of which Common Core is a part, or the Global United Nations, or the World Health Organization, or the International Labor Organization, what is the one thing they have all in common? That they have completely and utterly failed to provide any solutions or any positive input about what's going on in this so-called pandemic. When it's getting fixed, when it's getting defeated, it's getting beaten on the ground, right? It's getting dealt with nation by nation, rolling up their sleeves, going into communities. There's nothing globalist about this. Not in the least. Our global organizations are in many ways, for lack of a better word, responsible for this. Do we need this kind of globalism? Should commerce be internationalized the way it is? Should we not produce our own drugs? Remember a few years ago we were all talking about going to Canada, for God's sake, to get our prescription drugs because of all the regulation, all of the paperwork, all of the profiteering going on in Congress and the Senate and even the presidency over the last few years, going back 10, 20 years, profiteering over, just ask Biden in the White House what he got from China. All of this profiteering going on means that our health and welfare has been exported globally. And global institutions and global organizations benefit when it gets worse, not when it gets better. They benefit when we suffer and need them. Time to throw the country open again and de-globalize. Don't just know your Constitution, live it. This has been Liberty News Hour. As always, you can go to thenewamerican.com for more information